communicating daily events to you. All right. So our first presenter is going to be Michelle Holbrook, and Michelle is with Pasadena Humane. She'll be followed by Rebecca Barboza with Department of Fish and Wildlife. But right now, we're all going to sit back and enjoy the presentation. Then we'll do some Q&A. And again, enjoy yourself. And as you come in, we'll give a little wave and let you know that we're here with you. All right.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am Michelle Holbrook. I'm the outreach coordinator at Pasadena Humane. So that means that I go out into the community virtually right now and educate people on who we are, what we do, and how we can help each other. It's a reciprocal relationship. Without you, we wouldn't be able to provide for the animals, and and without us, you guys may not have all of the resources that you need to care for your pet. So I'm going to go through a slideshow presentation. It's a roughly 8 to 10 minutes or so, just about who we are and what we do. Okay, so welcome to Pasadena Humane. This is Dia Duvernette. She is our president and CEO. She comes to us from North Carolina, and she's been with the organization for about a year now. So a little bit about our history. Many of you may not know we were founded in 1903 as the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children and Dumb Animals. So we originally cared for working animals like horses and mules and donkeys, and we also took in abused women and orphans up until the mid-1930s. Today, we are a donor-supported nonprofit organization. We are a private 501c3 organization, which means most of our shelter is funded by donations. We run off of about 60% donations. We are a socially conscious animal shelter, okay? And we provide animal care and services for our homeless and owned animals in the greater Los Angeles area. I will show you the 11 different service cities that we cover, and it's about 100 square miles. We offer some other life-saving programs and services that support the human-animal bond, and we really try to do our best to help keep animals in their home. This is a lovely shot of our shelter. Okay. Formerly, you guys may have known us as the Pasadena Humane Society and SPCA. Sometimes that was shortened to PHS, which got us confused a little bit with Pasadena High School, which we are definitely not. So just recently, we shortened our name. Pasadena Humane, short and sweet, helped to clear up some brand confusion, but we still have the same dedication to the animals that we've always had. Okay. Our mission and our vision is very clear. We'd like to lead the way toward a compassionate and caring community for all animals. So this includes our companion animals residing in homes, our homeless animals, as well as coexisting with our wildlife. Okay. We have a staff of 130 or so staff members, and we run a lot on volunteer services. We've got over 1,500 volunteers. Most of these volunteers are aged 15 and over, but we have a lot of programming for children as well. Okay. Each year, we take in approximately 11,000 animals. Okay. These animals are strays, owner turn-ins, impounded animals from abuse, neglect, or hoarding cases, and include our sick and injured wildlife. We offer food, shelter, medical care, and enrichment while we try and get these animals adopted. So speaking of adoptions, we adopt nearly 5,000 pets each year. We also transfer animals to rescues and other care facilities that can better help them. And we've helped about 1,300 pets get reunited with their families each year. Our wellness services include shelter medicine, which helps to take care of our shelter animals. We also offer low or no cost spay and neuter surgeries, vaccine clinics, microchipping, and then you may have seen us in November at Memorial Park because we offered a mobile wellness clinic. Okay, our field services, this is Officer Oliver. We have 11 control localities. We will accept animals from all of the service areas, regardless of health, age, or breed. Our call center dispatchers take about 35,000 calls each year. And we also help to provide disaster response, including fires and floods. Okay. This is a list of all of our service areas. There's 11 of them. Of course, Sierra Madre is on this list, but we go as far east as Bradbury, west out to Glendale, north to La Crescenta, Montrose, and as far south as San Marino and South Pasadena. Okay. Some of our things, outreach and education. This is one of my favorite things to talk about because this is mostly where my job lies, is with outreach and education. We go out to different festivals. You may have seen us at the Wisteria Festival with our mobile adoption unit and telling people exactly who we are and what we do, much like I'm educating you tonight. We also have lots of different education programs for our children. We have after school story time twice a month, as well as wildlife and watercolors, where they learn to paint different animals and then also get a brief introduction on them. This past week, we talked about peafowl and parrots. We also have 2 after-school clubs divided into groups for children ages 7 to 11 and those that are 12 to 14. We're also piloting in October a 4-part series on careers in animal care. So our first one will be a dog trainer. We're getting Jackson Galaxy, a cat trainer, an exotic animal veterinarian, and then Lisa Young from the Rescue Train as an entrepreneur of a successful animal rescue group. Okay, you may have seen our Wiggle Waggle Wagon. This is a 35-foot custom RV, and it attends about 100 different events each year. This is our mobile adoption office, so you will often see dogs, cats, and rabbits on it. This is also the vessel that we use for our mobile wellness clinics, as well as command center for disaster response. Okay. One of our newest programs that we've really pride ourselves on in the San Gabriel Valley is helping Paws. We really reach out to assist pet owners in need to help them keep the pets in home and out of the shelter. So in the shelter, pets undergo kennel stress, and it's a real thing, and it affects the animals in really an undesirable way. So the harder that we can work to keep the pets in their home and out of the shelters, the better it is for the animals. So we'll provide wellness services. We have a once-a-month food bank where we provide food, litter, and supplies such as leashes, collars, and beds. We also do have temporary boarding available, as well as a behavior helpline. And speaking of behavior, we have training classes. So we have 100 or so training classes, beginning with puppies, where they learn how to socialize with each other. We have basic obedience classes, learning how to walk on a leash. We offer classes during the week and on the weekend. And we also have a free behavior helpline, which receives nearly 900 calls and emails each year. Okay. And then wildlife, we take in about 2,000 injured, sick, and orphaned animals each year, and this includes those cute little squirrels that you see on the screen, opossums, skunks, and sometimes the occasional orphaned bobcat. Okay, and the reason that we are can do this is because we are one of 2 shelters in Southern California that possess a wildlife permit. So we also help facilitate wildlife transfers to appropriate rehabilitation facilities. So we have a great relationship with the Southern California Parrot Rescue in San Diego, which helps us take care of all of those summer parrots that you see out on your phone lines. Okay, so we talked about our Humane Education and Kids for Animals, our after school clubs. We do offer summer camp. This year it was given completely virtual. We also offer a program called Barks and Books, where we have pet assisted therapy volunteers go in with their pet therapy animals to the libraries, and the kids can read to them in a non-judgmental environment. We also send teams out to senior centers. We give workshops and then tours and presentations when we're not in a pandemic. Different ways to get involved is to adopt from us, volunteer, donate. You can attend an event such as our Wiggle Waggle Walk, which is coming up. It's in our 22nd year, and this year it is virtual. There's lots of information at wigglewagglewalk.org. Okay. We also have a shelter shop. So much like you would go into PetSmart or Petco, you can find all the supplies that you need for your animals right at our shelter. And the profits that we make from the shelter shop go directly to help the animals that we have on site. Okay. As of right now, we are open as an essential business, and we continue to provide many services, but we've done things a little bit differently. We're going on an appointment-based model where we do offer virtual adoptions. The shelter is not open to the public to walk through. And one of the biggest reasons is that because most of our animals are in foster care, so they're not even on site. Our shelter shop is open to walk-in customers, and we are accepting donations. Okay. Shortly, we will be reopening our spay and neuter clinic to the public, as well as our vaccine clinic and training classes. Okay, but we have modified things. We've installed plexiglass in all of our offices. We have a 6-foot social distancing, so you'll see these little markers throughout the shelter. We are required to wear masks while on campus, and that is for staff and the public when they come in. Okay, so at your leisure, I've included a link in the chat box to this video that just tells a little bit about who we are, what we do, and what we're doing now. A little bit more exciting because there's more animals than what I'm seeing. So you guys can take a look at that when you can. So all the information, where to find us, our phone number, our website, if you are savvy on social media. So, do we have any questions? I know I gave you guys a lot of information to digest.
Let's see.
Did Catherine have a question?
She was for
Any questions
for Fish and Game.
for Michelle?
So I do see one here in the chat box from Leslie. So Leslie, yes, we are, we do allow volunteers at the age of 15 to volunteer without their parents, and that has been for quite some time.
Okay.
As of right now, our volunteer services are suspended due to the current pandemic, but all of the information is on our website at pasadenahumane.org to volunteer. There's also links to all of our kids' workshops. And we've got a ton of different like educational videos and worksheets for the kids to do as well. There's a page for service projects, and there's about a dozen different directions for different projects that help benefit the shelter animals.
Are there any other
question?
Yeah.
So
Who is
the
it?
question I have is,
Robert Crackle.
Oh,
Yeah.
can you
Hi,
hear?
Robert. I
Yeah.
can hear you.
Great. A question about animal safety. I mean, we live at the border here between developed land and wild land. What's the best way to keep our animals safe out there? I mean, I think we've all seen many different types of wildlife come through our area. What
Yes.
tips do you have for keeping our pets safe?
So if you're out for a walk on a dog, keep them on a 6-foot leash. We highly discourage the use of retractable leashes. Once a dog gets going, they can break really easily. But if you have them within a 6-foot distance of you, it's easy to control, especially when you are confronted by wildlife. If you are, if you've got cats, it's recommended to keep them inside, or create a catio, which is, it's your patio and it's all enclosed, but it's still on the outside, designed specifically for the cats. So did that answer your question, Robert?
It did. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Andy, did you have a question?
I didn't, but I can ask a question if you like. Thanks, Michelle. That was a great presentation. I guess the question I would have is, have you noticed a dramatic change either in the animals that get adopted or the animals coming into the shelter during the pandemic?
So yeah, I mean, a lot of animals are having to adapt to everyone working from home. I can say, like, I've got a dog and she looks at me like, what are you still doing here? I want my time. And people have just really come out. We had about 1,200 people raise their hands and say, hey, I want to foster an animal, while we're in this pandemic. But I would say one of the biggest changes that we see is a lot of people are requesting to surrender their animals due to having to relocate. So, and when the animals are used to being in the home and they've been used to people always being around, because most of us are, at that work from home stage, when they do come into the shelter, I talked about that kennel stress, and, they're in a new environment and they're enclosed in a small space. Our kennels are located outside. We do our best to make sure that they stay cool. We have them, the tops of them are covered, which drops the temperature by 8 degrees. When it's 90 degrees, we have misters that automatically kick on, but they're going from, most likely this, cool, comfy, plush, bed to being in a 13-foot concrete kennel. So sometimes we see a lot of behaviors come out of them that normally wouldn't, and which is really why our fosters are so important, because they can take these animals into the house and then we can see how they respond in someone's home, and it helps. The more information we have, the better it is to get them adopted. I can say myself, I've fostered neonatal kittens for a little over a year now, and the kittens that come into my home, they're raised with a dog and they're, given all of that tender, loving care that they need. And so when they do go into homes, they're successful. I mean, we show these animals what it's like to be with kids. I have a niece, my niece just turned 3, but we stick our fingers in their mouth and in their ears so they get used to these things. So when they go into a home, they're almost, pretty bulletproof, because they're used to a lot of different things. So when the animals do go into foster care, it is a very good thing.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else?
So
I believe that is it. Okay, let's,
Well, Michelle? Well done.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm sure I'll be in contact with you later this week.
Sounds good.
You're going to stick around, I hope.
I am going to stick around. I'm very interested to see what Rebecca has to share with us.
Oh, perfect. There's your lead in, Rebecca. Where are you?
There I am. Let me get my screen up.
There you are.
There we go. Okay. My
Okay,
name
if
is
I may, I'll interrupt for a second for any of the late attendees that may have just joined us. This is Rebecca Barboza from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Okay, ma'am, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've been working for the department for about 20 years now. My specialty is large mammals, but I work with anything with fur and feathers. I'm also the regional human wildlife conflict coordinator. And I wanted to thank the Sierra Madre Police Department and the City of Sierra Madre for having this webinar and for including the department. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us. This is the usually I prefer in-person presentations. I like to connect with people a little bit more, but we'll do our best here in a virtual environment. So let's get started here. In California, we have one species of bear, and that's the American black bear. Historically, they were found primarily in Northern California, and now they currently inhabit all the mountainous areas of the state. Prior to the 1920s, the California grizzly inhabited much of the state, and when the grizzly was extirpated, the black bear began a gradual expansion southward. The more recent areas of expansion are in the darker color here, and by recent, I mean like the last 30 to 40 years. Bears can stand 5 to 6 feet tall. They can weigh up to 600 pounds. That's a maximum. Usually it's the average is 150 to 300 pounds. And they can live 25 to 30 years in the wild. And that's an extraordinary amount of time for a wild animal to live in the wild. There can be some confusion about bear species in California because there's a variety of different coat colors that we see. We see the typical black coat color, which is seen more commonly in Northern California. In Southern California, we tend to see a lighter color, cinnamon brown colored bear. And there's even a blonde color phase that's found in areas of North America that have harsh winters. But these are all black bears. Reproduction begins mid-June, and the black bear has a physiological adaptation called delayed implantation. And what this is the fertilized eggs do not implant into the womb right away. And this allows the animal to both breed and give birth at optimal periods of time. If the animal has insufficient fat reserves on her body, she will spontaneously abort one or more of the fertilized eggs. If she does have sufficient fat reserves, she can give birth to up to 5 cubs. And this is a situation where human food sources can facilitate local population increases. In the wild, a female bear may have 1 or 2 cubs, and those cubs may survive to adulthood just because of limited resources. In our urban environment, however, where they have 24/7 access to food, water, and shelter, bears typically have sufficient fat reserves to allow them for multiple births. So we have this urban bear population that's kind of exponentially growing, and that's a reason why we're seeing more and more bears in the foothill communities. The sow will give birth to an underdeveloped fetus midwinter, and the cubs will mature in the den. The cubs emerge with the sow in the spring. They're weaned by midsummer. And the cubs stay with the sow until they're 18 to 20 months old. During this time, she's teaching them social and foraging behavior, but they can be independent as early as 6 months of age. A baby bear weighs less than a pound, and they're fully grown within 5 years. So if you think about that, from less than a pound to 150, 300 pounds within 5 years, that's a tremendous amount of growth, and that takes a tremendous amount of food to build that body condition and maintain that body condition. Black bears are omnivores, meaning they eat everything. They have generally a vegetarian diet, particularly in the springtime, but they will commonly consume animal protein. Their diet varies seasonally and with availability. Most of the reliance on human food is in the late summer and fall. And I do want to make a distinction. You'll hear me refer to wild bears versus urban bears. Well, of course, they're all wild animals, but when I make this distinction, I'm talking about their foraging habits. And this point that I made where it varies seasonally and with availability, and most of the reliance is in summer and fall. Well, with our urban bears, their diet really doesn't vary all that much from the human food sources that we provide for them. And of course, they rely on us most of the year for food sources. Adult bears are generally solitary, and their home range size varies depending on sex, age, population density, and food availability. It's believed that in the San Gabriel Mountains, bears have a home range size of about 3 to 11 square miles. And they have smaller home ranges in the urban interface. That's because, again, there's a dense population, there's plenty of food available, so they don't have to travel far to find their food sources. So probably about 1 to 3 square miles maximum in the urban areas. And they have been known to travel 100 or more miles, particularly when they're relocated. So this is just a graphical depiction of a home range scenario. We've got the male bear here with a large home range. We've got female adult bears with smaller home ranges. And we have the female juvenile bears that stay within the natal range, and then the adult male bears that disperse outside of their natal range. And it's usually these juvenile male dispersers that we encounter the problems with in the urban areas. Black bears have adapted to a variety of different vegetation types, from conifers and hardwoods to brush and meadows. This is a typical canyon in the Angeles National Forest where we see lots of bears. And this is actually, this brush habitat is really not typical habitat for a black bear. Black bears are arboreal, meaning they live in trees. So they've really adapted very well to this shrub habitat. And they've also adapted well to the urban interface as well. Bears begin a period of fattening in the fall, in which they begin eating more than they normally do. They'll generally den up in December. And Southern California is unique. We have mild winters, and we have, again, abundant food sources. And hibernation is an adaptation to help avoid the harsh winters. So our bears go through what's called a seasonal torpor. It's not a true hibernation. Most of our bears will retreat back away from the urban areas a little bit. They'll have reduced activity. They'll be sleeping more. They'll den up late in the season, or perhaps not at all. As a matter of fact, usually pregnant sows are the only ones that will den for the entire winter season. We've had a steady increase of the bear population over the past 30 to 35 years. We believe it's nearly tripled in that time. And these are conservative estimates because they're based on the hunter harvest, and not all areas of the state that have bears have hunted populations. In the 1990s, there were some estimates of bears in the Angeles National Forest, about 400 to 500 adults. And it was predicted that that was a 5% rate of increase since the 1970s. I didn't have access to that data, so I kind of had to extrapolate out. And what I came up with is about 1,400 bears in the Angeles National Forest. And there's about 1,000 square miles of habitat in the Angeles. And as you can see, there's more bears than there is available space, which is another reason why you don't see bears going back into the forest. They do so well in the urban areas. They're thriving there. And even if we put them back into the forest, they wouldn't know how to forage for their natural foods. They would go right to a campground or some developed site in the forest, or come right back to their home range. So when does the Department of Fish and Wildlife become involved in bear incidents? The Department of Fish and Wildlife is the steward agency for wildlife in California. We take reports for sightings, property damage, and other incidents, either remotely by phone or email, or on scene whenever possible. Of course, COVID has made that a little more tricky, but we still do on-scene investigations. We're the lead agency for public safety incidents. We're mandated by law to maintain healthy bear populations. And the goal of our statewide bear policy is to provide the public tools to minimize conflicts, at the same time avoid population impacts. Now I'll spend a few minutes on our depredation policy, and depredation is just a word that we use when a wild animal has damaged personal property. The first category is a no harm, no foul bear. This bear has wandered in fresh from the forest. It's naive to humans. It's looking for food and not for confrontation. That's generally those juvenile males that we see dispersing out of their natal range. They're simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. And generally, if we give it space and time, it will find its own corridor back to open space, and it will leave on its own, or it can be hazed or moved to the nearest available habitat. Category 2 is a habituated or nuisance bear. No property damage has occurred, but it's being a general nuisance. It's getting into garbage cans, it's peeking into windows, swimming in pools, that kind of thing, general nuisance type of situation. At this point, we recommend corrective measures such as obtaining bear-resistant garbage cans, removing attractants such as pet foods, keeping the barbecue grill clean, managing koi ponds, because that's a huge attractant in the San Gabriel foothills. Fencing, electrical fencing around sensitive structures, hazing, which is scaring the animal away. And because now we've had generations of bears that have grown up in this urban environment, I believe anyways, that many of these bears are born as a category 2. They're no longer that naive bear, that no harm, no foul bear. They're already habituated. The sow has taught them to live off of human food sources. And these bears are habituated. Habituated bears are not candidates for relocation. So category 2 bears can be kind of tricky to deal with. Category 3 is where damage occurs. Hazing is no longer effective. At this point, we still make corrective measures whenever possible. If the damage continues, the landowner can request a depredation permit from the department, which allows the property owner to kill the bear. And just keep in mind that there are strict firearms ordinances in all of the foothill cities that line the 210 freeway. So if someone was thinking about going that route, that's a complication, a pretty major complication. Proper management of attractants early on can prevent this situation. And that's our goal. That's why we try our best to manage the category 1 and category 2 bears before this happens. We don't want to see your property damaged. In Los Angeles County between 2006 and 2018, 11 depredation permits were issued and 7 bears were taken. You contrast that with Northern California, for instance, El Dorado County, during that same period of time, almost 400 permits were issued and 105 bears were taken. So Northern California is still our area of the highest bear population density, and they have the most bear incidents by far. Bear-resistant garbage cans are probably the #1 recommendation that we can make. This can here that you can't really see a very good picture of, it looks like a standard garbage can. It was tested on a grizzly bear. There's a grizzly bear there, and it couldn't open up that garbage can. And I really like this model because the locking mechanism is hidden inside, but it's on the sides of the container, so that when the trash apparatus comes to pick up the trash, it squeezes it in and it pops it open. So there's no need for you to unlock the garbage can on the day of pickup. It's fully automated. So I really like that model. And someone who doesn't have access to a bear-resistant garbage can, well, we suggest putting them in some sort of enclosed structure or a garage. And we always recommend that you disinfect the garbage cans on a weekly basis whenever the trash is picked up to minimize those odors. And if all else fails, get creative. This was at a Boy Scout camp up in the foothills, and they have a very strict garbage policy, but they didn't have access to a dumpster that was bear resistant. So they kind of made up their own solution. And the take-home message is sometimes you just have to think out of the box to outsmart the bears. So the most common question that we get is, why don't you just tranquilize the bear and move it away? Well, there's a lot of considerations that we have to look at before we chemically immobilize an animal. One of them is our policy during hunting season. Our drugs are administered to us under our veterinarian's licensed. And there are federal regulations that require that no controlled substances can enter into the food chain. Some of these drugs that we use can remain in the bear system for up to 14 days. And because of this, if we were to immobilize an animal and release it into the wild during hunting season, it's possible that a hunter could take that bear and ingest the meat and get sick. And even though that probably would never happen, that small risk our veterinarian would lose their license, and all of the staff statewide would lose chemical immobilization as a very valuable tool for managing wildlife. So because of that, we do not allow chemical immobilization 14 days prior to, during, and 14 days after hunting season. And this is the most active period for bears. Recall, I told you that in the fall, they start this period of hyperphagia where they're eating constantly. And that our hunting season begins the second Saturday in October and it ends in December. So this is the most active period for bears. So that's chemical immobilization is almost always not an option during hunting season. This does not apply to public safety incidents or injured or sick bears because they're not put back into the food chain. We have some inherent limitations of our equipment as well. Our dart rifles look like rifles, standard rifles, but they don't fire the same way. For one thing, the charges that we use are the same charges that you get in Home Depot to charge your staple guns. And those are notorious for being inaccurate and inconsistent. And the darts themselves are just hollow metal tubes that are filled with liquid. And sometimes when we shoot them out, they go spiraling off into the distance and they don't make their mark. We always carry a second prepared dart for that reason, but more often than not, a missed target is a missed opportunity because the animal will leave the area. We also have a large animal, but we have a very small target. We're going to target the shoulder area because the rump, which most people would think is a reasonable area to target, there's a lot of fat deposits on the rump, and those fat deposits will absorb the chemical and it will prevent the medication from getting into the bloodstream. Another common misconception is that as soon as the dart goes into the skin, the animal's down, boom, like that. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. In optimal conditions, drug induction time is from 2 to 5 minutes. Large fat deposits, stress hormones will also increase the induction time. And we have to consider the fact that bears will run after they're darted. They can sprint up to 25 to 35 miles per hour, which means they can run 1 to 2 miles before that drug even starts to take effect. I have a map of a neighboring city here, and Norumbega Drive in Monrovia is a hotspot for bear activity. And all these dots here are about 1 to 2 square air miles from Norumbega Drive. So we have to consider pre-COVID times, you know, do we want that bear to run towards that elementary school or that retirement center? Or not to mention, you know, we don't want an angry bear with a dart in its side running around the subdivisions. So there are a lot of things that we have to consider prior to chemical immobilization. Treed bears are also challenging. There's no escape route. We're darting from below, so it's going to climb farther up the tree, which is going to impact our ability to remove it. Also, as the bear is losing consciousness, the chest can become wedged between the branches and they can suffocate. We've also had instances where bears have fallen from the trees and that's resulted in deaths. A sow and cub is another challenge. In a trap situation, usually only the adult will go into the trap. Once the door slams, the cubs will scatter, and we're generally not there when the door slams. So we have no way of knowing how many cubs we have to account for. Immobilization is very similar. We can only immobilize one animal at a time, and we try not to immobilize cubs whenever possible. So that's another challenge when we're in an immobilization situation. There's also increased danger to the field personnel who are trying to immobilize this animal because the sow is already protective of her cubs, and we're trying to get close enough to tranquilize her. And we don't want to introduce drugs into a nursing bear's system. So I wanted to spend a few moments on our relocation policy. Basically, when you see us on the news and we're in hand with a bear, that animal has gotten itself into a situation that it couldn't get out of without our assistance. There are other situations too, like a bear at an elementary school and kids are on campus. That's obviously a situation where we need to get that bear out of there. But what we do is we move them to the nearest available habitat, which is generally less than a mile away. It's not intended to resolve human-wildlife conflicts. If we try to move an animal outside of its home range, suddenly it doesn't know where its food, its water, its competitors, its shelter are. So they're going to make a beeline right back to their old home range. And we've seen it happen time and time again. Remember, I said they can travel 100 or more miles to get back to what they know, and they will travel that far. However, there are extraordinary circumstances where we can get approval to move an animal over 25 miles away. And that's an approval that doesn't come on the ground. It's from Sacramento. And relocation does not fix the heart of the problem, which is the food and the attractants that brought the animals into the neighborhoods to begin with. Bear number 210 was an example of an extraordinary circumstance, an example of why moving bears does not work. Bear number 210, several years ago in a foothill community, this bear had traveled south of the 210 freeway, and we reached in, pull out a tag, and it happened to be a ear tag number 210. So the reason why we moved that bear is that it had crossed the freeway, and we didn't want to risk a vehicle accident with that bear. So we popped it into the nearest available habitat. It came down again south of the 210 freeway, started getting into some trouble, and we popped it up into north of the 210 again. This happened a couple of times, and pretty soon the media started picking up on this animal. It got its own Facebook page, its own Twitter account. It was a very famous bear. And we were faced with this situation because it was also drawing other bears into this area. In the meantime, a juvenile bear had followed this 210 bear down into this neighborhood, and it actually got hit by a car, which what we were trying to avoid in the beginning. So we were stuck with the situation of what are we going to do with this bear? It's not aggressive, so we're not going to euthanize it. And the only other option that we had was to put it in a captive facility, which is not a happy ending for a free-ranging animal. It's like putting him in jail for the rest of his life. But we don't like doing that. There's not enough captive facilities that will take in black bears. And so that's why relocation just doesn't work. If it did, we would do it in a second, because that's our favorite part of the job, is coming in contact with an animal. So I wanted to talk about public safety threats and some of the behaviors that we look at that guide our decisions to act on a public safety. So an imminent threat means that there's a likelihood of human injury based on the totality of the circumstances. We get a call that a bear is attacking a man. We show up on scene and we see this. Well, you know, the first instinct is to say, oh my God, we've got to save this guy. We've got to kill this bear. But if you look at the whole circumstance, it's actually in a zoo setting. And this animal was a captive bred animal that has known his trainer since it was a cub, and it was just messing around with his trainer. It wasn't attacking him at all. And that was just my lame attempt at trying to visualize the situation to you. But basically, we don't want to kill a bear unnecessarily. So, you know, we need to look at the totality of the circumstances before we act. Public safety incidents are determined by law enforcement. So the Department of Fish and Wildlife, wildlife officers, local sheriff, police department, park ranger, Forest Service enforcement, or any other law enforcement entity will determine whether or not an animal is a public safety. Many animals communicate agitation in a stereotypic way. So all of these animals are pretty angry. I'm going to focus in on the mountain lion here. You can see here, its ears are pinned down on the side of its head. It's showing its teeth. It's probably vocalizing And look at the whiskers. They're just splayed out. They're very, his whole face is very tense. And you can't see it very well, but there's the little hairs on his back are sticking straight up. This is an agitated animal. If we get a call that there's an aggressive animal on scene, and we pull up and we see an animal behaving like this, well, that's going to be a major factor on determining on whether or not we're going to deem this a public safety animal. So these animals have similar postures and their mouths are open, but they're not acting in an aggressive way. In fact, they're just yawning. The ears are forward here, even though the vibrissae, the whiskers are splayed out and the mouth is open. It's obviously yawning. Its front teeth aren't showing. These are not aggressive animals at all. Instinctively, you might think that this animal is stalking something, but if you think about a domestic cat getting ready to pounce on a ball of yarn, well, that cat is going to shift its weight forward. It's going to kind of move its little rear end around, whip its tail back and forth, and then it's going to pounce. And that's basically what a mountain lion does. So this one, its weight is transferred back. It's not ready to pounce on something. What it's doing is it's just trying to hide in that brush until the photographer or whatever it is that disturbed it passes it by. Another common misconception is that if a bear stands up on its hind feet, it's all over, you're going to get injured. And that's far from the truth. Bears have this amazing ability to stand up on their hind legs, and they're curious animals. These animals have their ears forward. They're not in an aggressive stance. They're actually probably looking at this photographer, trying to decide if they continue forward or if they have to find an escape route. So the take-home message on this section is that the mere presence of wildlife in your neighborhood does not necessarily pose an imminent threat to public safety. Remember, an imminent threat means that someone will be injured, and the only way to resolve this conflict is immediate euthanasia. Generally, most of the time with space and time, the animal will leave the neighborhood on its own, or it can be hazed without a mass response from the agencies. And we're really fortunate in California because all of our major predatory species, none of them are inherently aggressive towards humans. If you think about an African lion or a polar bear, these animals are inherently aggressive towards humans. So, you know, if they're on scene, that is a definite imminent threat to human safety. But the black bear, mountain lion, coyotes, these animals are not inherently aggressive towards humans. And if they were, we would have completely different policies. An informed public is the most effective solution to most problems related to bears. Most importantly, never feed bears, intentionally or unintentionally. There are consequences that go along with feeding wildlife. This slide is kind of hard to see because it was taken from a video, but this in the center here is a deer, and this over here is a bear. And what happened was in this particular neighborhood, not in Sierra Madre, but it was in a neighborhood where the wildlife were being fed, and the deer were no longer wary of their predators, and the bears were, you know, waiting for their handouts as well. So on this morning, this deer showed up in someone's backyard, and the bear showed up at the same time. The deer felt perfectly safe, didn't, you know, have any reason to leave, and the bear took that opportunity to attack and kill the deer. This could have been prevented if people would have not fed the wildlife. So, you know, like I say, there are consequences of feeding wildlife. Food conditioned bears that have caused property damage and or killed pets or livestock may be killed under the state's depredation policy and state laws. We don't want to issue a depredation permit for a bear. We don't want to have to kill a bear because it's become aggressive because people have been feeding it. And that's the most common reason that bears become aggressive, is when people start feeding the bears. Feeding wildlife is prohibited by state law and by certain municipal codes. A couple of human-bear conflict prevention tips: install or request bear-resistant garbage cans, freeze wet garbage like meat or bones until pickup day, keep garbage inside a garage or secure building until pickup, and disinfect those garbage containers weekly with bleach or ammonia, clean barbecue grills regularly, keep pet food and water indoors, harvest tree fruits, particularly avocados, regularly, and pick up fallen fruits. And remember, bears and other wild animals are attracted to anything edible and smelly, and it's against the law to feed bears. I wanted to end with a discussion about the department's Wildlife Watch program. This is a program that we put together. We started with coyotes, and it was based on the neighborhood watch program that most communities use to manage crime. And Wildlife Watch encourages cities and other agencies to prepare comprehensive wildlife management plans, which include public education efforts that will change human behaviors. Wildlife Watch establishes a comprehensive integrated management strategy that will minimize human-wildlife conflicts and will improve the quality of life in urban settings. It's based on conservation and ecological principles, and it's based on agency and community leadership coaching. It's also based on respect for wildlife and one another. And if you wanted more information about how you would start a Wildlife Watch program in your community, you can go to our webpage, which is www.wildlife.ca.gov. And in the search box on our webpage, type in Wildlife Watch, and then you'll get a link to the Wildlife Watch webpage with lots more information. And with that, I can take any questions. I'm sure there's a lot.
If,
We're on that.
Bob Burnett?
Catherine, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. First of all, Rebecca, thank you for coming on and sharing so much great information. I think you've reinforced a lot of what I understood, but it's actually really great to hear it and understand. I actually hadn't thought about the barbecue grill, so now I'm going to have to go out and clean it.
Yes.
One I hadn't thought of. I guess one question I know that lots of people are going to have, and I don't want this to devolve, but I want to ask if, I know there's an investigation that was being done on the mother and the cub that were tranquilized, and then of course unfortunately the cub died. And I hate to put you on the spot, but I just wondered if there's any kind of update on that, because I know that's something that in a very negative way obviously people got very upset about, but also I think in a positive way has led the Sierra Madre community to start having the conversation of what do we do to actually live in proximity with these animals and do it respectfully and do it in a way that makes sense, that protects them and protects humans who are living right next to them.
Right. So you wanted an update on the cub and the on the sow situation. Well, you know, like I said, we do try to avoid tranquilizing cubs because there's not been an awful lot of work that's been done on, you know, the response of cubs to these medications. And I wasn't on scene that day, so I don't know what the circumstances were or why that cub was tranquilized, but I always support the people in the field because I'm not there. I don't know what that situation was. But, you know, whether it's a cub or an adult bear, whenever that dart leaves that projector, you know, we're taking that animal's life into our hands. And we make sure we're trained. We go back to training every 5 years to update our certification to chemically immobilize wildlife. And we are taught to make sure that we monitor the animal while it's down. We stay with that animal until it's completely ambulatory, until it's completely up on all 4 feet and not not a hint of drug remaining in that body, because we don't want anything to happen to that animal. But again, whenever that dart leaves the projector, there's always a chance that something can go wrong. Nothing's foolproof. And we're working with serious drugs here that our veterinarian like I say, could lose their license over if we misuse. So in this particular case, the cub was tranquilized successfully twice to get it off of the scene, out of the scene and into one facility. And then we had to move it to another facility for holding. So it was successfully tranquilized twice. And on the third time, when we were going to release them into the wild, that's when something went terribly wrong. And the necropsy results didn't really show anything conclusive. So anyways, you know, that was a tragic thing. We didn't, you know, again, we're a natural resources agency. We're here because we love wildlife and we don't want to see anything go wrong with, you know, with our situations. But unfortunately, you know, it was a learning experience for us and for the community, hopefully as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. My questions mostly were answered that I put in a long question to you. But I wanted to know, could not the baby bear have been crated instead of tranquilized?
Well, like I say, if I had been on scene, I would have an answer for you, but I wasn't on scene. So I don't know what the circumstances were that led to the tranquilization.
But does that happen in other areas, that baby cubs can be crated? I mean, can that happen?
That's what we try to do. In an ideal situation, we tranquilize the bear with very little fanfare. The bear goes down, we pick up the cub by the scruff of the neck and we put it into a crate. That's the best way of handling it, yes. But not all situations call for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I have a quick question for a personal encounter. I mean, you hear all kinds of different things and what to do if you're out and about and you encounter a bear. What is your recommendation for your own personal safety when you encounter a bear, if you're out on, you know, walking or running or what have you?
Okay, very good question. And that's something that I keep forgetting to put into my presentation. So thank you for bringing that up. It really depends on the situation. If you're in close proximity to the bear, I've been basically nose to nose with a bear that was protecting a carcass. And I was within, you know, a swiping distance of that animal. So I very carefully and cautiously backed up slowly. I kept eye contact with the bear, but I backed up. And as soon as I backed off, the bear backed off. In other situations where the bear is some distance away, you can actually, if the bear has, if the bear has an escape route, an obvious escape route, you can actually start hazing it. You can yell at it, scream at it, bang pots and pans together, get an air horn, toot the air horn, loud noises, make yourself big, make yourself bigger than the bear thinks you are. So those are two common scenarios and two different ways that you should handle yourself.
Great, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So, and Rebecca, I also put it in the chat box, but our website also has access to wildlife resource guide. So what to do if you see a bear, a coyote,
Excellent.
You know, all different wildlife animals. So I did put it in the chat box, our website. It's pasadenahumane.org.
Thank you.
Mute everybody else so we
Any
can
other
talk to
questions?
Rebecca and Michelle, or just say goodbye to everybody. Is it mic on?
Yes, Mike's on.
Well, very good. My apologies for whatever someone chose to say, even though we've had some experience with that earlier this week. Again, sorry that happened, and for whoever said it, sorry you had to resort to something like that. And we'll kind of make sure we find out who you are and you won't be invited back next time. But thank you, Rebecca, Michelle, thank you both. I'm sure the residents got an opportunity that they don't normally get, and that's to speak, you know, straight one-on-one with representatives that we have. So vital to our area and the commitments that you all make to keep us safe and to keep our wildlife safe and protected. So with that, if you ladies have anything to say, here's your chance. Or I'll be in contact with Rebecca and Michelle probably tomorrow or Friday. Anything else, anyone?
Just keep safe out there, wear your masks, wash your hands, and watch out for the bears.
Keep them, if you see one, back up, and hopefully he'll back up too, right? He'll keep moving. Okay, Sierra Madre, thank you. As Rebecca just said, be safe. And we'll see you again tomorrow night when we have a presentation by, kind of ties in if you're up in the mountains and whatnot, not being safe. That's a Sierra Madre Search and Rescue.
Oh.
So we'll see you all tomorrow night. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Thanks for having
Welcome.
us.
Okay, guys. Bye, Catherine. Thank you for your questions.